All right, so chapter 19, legal descriptions and deeds. This is another important chapter where you get a lot of exam questions from. In this chapter, we're going to discuss three methods of describing real property and legal descriptions, identifying the four types of deeds used in New Jersey and the effects of various clauses. And we're going to go over the anatomy of a deed. All right, so let's start off with legal descriptions. It's an exact way of describing real property in a contract, deed, mortgage, or other document that's acceptable in a court of law. A legal description can be combined or altered only by a competent authority such as a surveyor or a title attorney. The deed is the document to convey one's right, title, or interest in real property. And it must include an adequate description of the land that's being conveyed. There are three legal descriptions of land which you must know: metes and bounds, the rectangular survey, also known as a government survey, and a plat map. A plat is a map of a subdivision recorded in the county where the land is located. So on page 353, let's highlight legal description, what it is, and what those three legal descriptions are. Guys got that?
Got it.
All right. So a legal description should always include the name of the county and the state in which the land is located. Here are some terms for us to learn. A benchmark is a local permanent marker to aid surveyors in their measurements, which could be based on those local markers rather than the actual benchmark, which could be miles away. A datum is a measurement of elevation. It is the point, line, or surface from which elevation is measured according to the USGS. That's the United States Geological Survey, which is a department within our government. They monitor our planet. All right. Everything from sea levels to volcanic activity to asteroids that could be hitting our planet to they monitor all kinds of stuff like that has to deal with the earth. The weather. You guys ever see the weather on the news? Often they'll show you like the satellite imagery of the clouds coming in and the weather patterns. And sometimes if they don't have their own satellites, they're actually using the data that's being reported to them through the USGS. So you see the USGS logo on that satellite imagery that's coming in. That's actually a department of our government that assists with monitoring of the planet, the weather systems, all that stuff. And then the monuments. Anyway, so the U.S. Geological Survey defines zero elevation as the mean sea level at New York Harbor. The mean is the average. So that is zero elevation. Now, monuments are markers that we place at the corners of each of the corners of a property to delineate the boundaries of your property. When you get a survey done, you could pay an extra fee to a surveyor to have them install these markers, which could be made of wood. They could be steel stakes. They could be a ribbon that they pin to a tree. Steel, more like iron. They got the rebar. So they got that rebar that pins to the ground, and then they hammer it down below the surface of the earth there. So that would be the rebar. And so this is what a surveyor's benchmarks look like. these benchmarks could tell you, as of this point, wherever you see it, you're X amount of feet above sea level. Like in this example right here, it shows you the U.S. Coastal and Geodetic Survey is the one that placed this benchmark. And the elevation, they show you the elevation over here, how many feet above sea level. And this was placed in 1933. It looks like they glued it into a rock or boulder or stone. So you could be hiking out in the woods somewhere in the middle of the wilderness and find these things glued into stone or rock. But they have a lot of different ways that they could look. It could be a sign like this. It could be, these are the common markers that you see. This one was placed in 1882, and then it's just getting reset in 2016. There's some more benchmarks. This one is just carved right into the rock in 1890. This one is right in a brick. Tells you as of this point, you're so many feet above sea level. There's the signage. Here's another one. Like even Disney has their own custom ones, the survey markers. They do their own surveys, I guess, for their property. Here's a survey mark. So they got a lot of different looks to them. Now you get a group of surveyors. Surveyors usually work in teams of two. I guess back in the olden days when this picture was taken, when the country was just being mapped out, I guess they had larger teams there, but that were surveying the land. But these are some of the tools that surveyors used, a compass and a chain. Now, a chain is also a unit of measure because the chain is based on the chain's length. So the surveyors would the two-man teams would stretch out the chain, and then you'd have the guy he would draw the map in his notebook. That's probably what this guy right here is doing. They stretch out these chains. They do the measurements. Now, a chain can be 33 feet or 66 feet in length. And basically, they'd stretch out that chain, and then they would use the compass to see the direction that it was going in so that they could accurately map out the entire United States, as well as people's properties, state lines, municipality lines, things of that nature. But back then, they were just, mapping out the general state lines and the country itself. So here's some units of measure we need to know. How many feet in an acre? The township is 36 square miles or 6 miles squared, which we didn't get into yet. And a section is 1 mile square, and there's 640 acres in a section. You don't need to know about the 640 acres. You just need to know that a township is 36 square miles and a section is 1 square mile. Those 36 square miles, each square mile is referred to as a section within a township. Okay, then we have other units of measure. We don't need to learn about hectares or anything like that, but acres, townships, and sections, you do. So we just learned about what a benchmark is, what a datum is, and what a monument is. Those are those steel rebar. Now I got to put that word rebar in every one of these. Rebar. Stakes or ribbons in the ground, right? So the first of the 3 legal descriptions of land is the metes and bounds description. A metes and bounds description of distance and direction around the property's boundaries. It's only used in 13 original states, which New Jersey is one of. And that measurement begins at one of the corners of the property, which we'll call the POB, or point of beginning. That's a definite designated point at which the measurement commences and ends around when doing a measurement of a piece of land. Okay, so the metes and bounds legal description of land is used in New Jersey and the 13 original colonies or the 13 original states only, New Jersey being one of them. And the measurement begins and ends at a definite designated point called the point of beginning, the POB. So, a measurement of distance and direction around the property's boundary, meets like meters and bounds like the boundaries, meets and bounds. The measurement begins and ends at a designated point of beginning, the POB. The surveyor's measurement can proceed clockwise or counterclockwise. It doesn't matter which direction they go, as long as they note it on their survey. And then they have to continue along that direction until they complete and close the loop around the property's boundaries. The monuments are used to establish real estate boundaries. So the surveyor stakes or ribbons that they bang into the ground at each of the corners of the property. So we, as real estate agents, should always advise buyers to pay the extra fee to the surveyor and ask, well, first of all, ask the surveyor how much they charge for it and pay the extra fee for them to put those stakes in the ground at each of the corners. Because it's one thing for them to give you a map of your property that shows your boundaries. Good luck finding the actual boundaries then. You should also pay the extra fee to have that surveyor bang those stakes into the ground at each of the corners of the property. So now you could tie a string around one of those markers to the other, and you could have a visual depiction now where you could actually see your property's boundaries. And then don't ever take them out of the ground. You just bang them into the ground below the surface of the grass so it doesn't mess up your lawnmower when you cut the grass, and it'll always be there. If you need to, you could use a metal detector to find it again, you know? So you can always shop around surveyors to find the best rate. Some surveyors will charge you $475 per stake that they put in the ground. Others charge you $50. So it is a wide range there of the fees that they charge. So don't just go with whichever one the attorney calls to survey the property. Ask the attorney what the surveyors for the surveyor's information to ask how much they charge for their putting those stakes and ribbons in the trees or the ground. Maybe you could negotiate with them on the price of it or get a different surveyor to do it that charges a lesser fee. Okay? Because it is very important that they get that in if they ever want to put in a fence or build a shed. It has to be so many feet off the property line. And how are you going to know where the property line is if they didn't put those stakes in the ground where you could visually see it? You know, trying to figure it out on a map yourself, you're not going to be able to do that. So that's the tip I gave you down here that talks about that. All right, now meets and bounds is a description. Let's do the highlights. I've read it already several times, so let's just do the highlights here on page 354 for the meets and bounds and what monuments are.
What is the difference between monument and the bench?
A benchmark, okay, monuments are placed at the corners of the property by the surveyors so that you can see your property lines. The benchmarks, a benchmark could be 0 sea level at New York Harbor. That's the benchmark. That's the actual benchmark. It's sea level at New York, the mean sea level at New York Harbor that dictates the elevation, right? Now, if you hire a surveyor to survey your property in where do you live? What town you live in?
Piscataway.
Okay, so if you want to get a survey on your property in Piscataway, is your surveyor going to go to New York Harbor and work his way all the way back to your property doing measurements to find out what the elevation is, to find out if you're in a flood zone or not?
No.
No. But some point in time, someone did. And along the way, they put these markers that show as of this particular point where this marker is, it's at this elevation. So now your surveyor can base his measurement off of that local. He'll start his measurement from that local marker back to your property instead of the actual marker, which is miles and miles away. You follow?
Yeah.
It makes your job a lot easier. That's why I said you could see these things embedded in stone and bricks and all over the place. You could find them in the middle of the forest. You're hiking and you see it embedded into a boulder, you know. Maybe somebody put that there in the 17 or 1800s, you know, when they were laying out the land. Sometimes when they get worn out, they need to be reset. So the surveyors will go back and they'll reset them. And put in a newer one that can be read. All right.
Okay.
So here's an example of a survey of a property here, and you could see there's a lot of measurements. There's a lot going on here because this property is not a typical rectangle, perfect rectangle. You've got angles on each side. The front of the lot is on a curve. The back of the lot is at an angle. Over here, you could see that this is the property line right here, but you could see that the surveyor put a notation that there's a wood fence back here, and that this wood fence is going over the property line. It doesn't state whose fence it is, but I happen to know it's this guy's fence back here that's going over the property line onto this guy's property, because that guy's property is mine. You know, so this is a survey of my property here. Okay, so you can see this neighbor's fence is going onto my property. They recently redid their fence, and I told them that they needed to make sure they followed the survey and put the fence where it belonged, because it was about 1.5 feet on my property. So I told them to set it back onto their property or the actual line. All right. And here's an example of what a survey write-up would look like by a surveyor. So you got the map, but they also give an explanation of their survey. And this is the way that a more modern survey would read. Because if we go back a couple slides, this is the way an old-time survey may read. It could say, a tract of land located at the township of Kingston County in Burlington, state of New Jersey, may be described as the following. Beginning at the intersection of the east line of Jones Road and the south line of Skull Drive, thence east along the south line of Skull Drive for 200 feet, thence south 15 degrees east 216.5 feet more or less to the center thread of Red Skull Creek, thence northwesternly along the center line of said creek. You know, that's basically the way that they would write these. You know, but sometimes you could even see them referencing boulders. They'd be like meandering along the river until you get to the old oak tree at the intersection of whatever. Now, if we were to read that today, that old oak tree could have fallen down during a storm, you know. So surveyors would have to try to recreate that map, because some of those markers or references are no longer there. They'd have to get maybe surveys from other properties in the area to then reverse engineer the survey to figure out the person's property's boundaries. All right, so here's one that's a little bit more modern. It's not super modern because this one is, I think, from the 50s. All right. Well, it starts at the 50s, and then it was, okay, in 78, the rest of it's from 1978. So, you know, it says, all that tract or parcel of land and premises situated, lying and being in the city of Linden, county of Union, and the state of New Jersey, which is known and designated as Lot 8, Block 199-106, on a map entitled The Map of Sunnyfield Incorporated, Union County, made by Davison Ross Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors, September 1949, and filed in the office of the Register of County on January 13, 1950, in whatever map number. The foregoing premises are further described in accordance with certain survey made by WMC Sweeney Associates in Linden, dated 1978, because it got updated. Basically, where my property is, it used to be a golf course. Okay. The whole section, this whole area of town where my property is used to be a golf course in the 1940s. All right. They bought the developer bought the golf course and converted it into a subdivision. All right. So that's where you're talking about the map of Sunnyfield Incorporated, because the whole section of town that I'm in is called Sunnyfield section of Linden, and that whole area used to be a golf course. So later on in 1978, when they started, when this particular property was bought, we had another survey done. And it says, beginning at the point at the southwesterly side of Sunnyfield Drive, which point is distant to 312.06 feet along various courses and distances. Now, I don't know how a surveyor can read this and then find the actual location. You know, you need a lot of study. You need a lot of knowledge in map making, which is called cartography. So you need to have somebody who's an expert in cartography, the map making. They got to be really good at math, because there's going to be a lot of measurements that you need to take, measuring curves and diameters and distances and such when you're a surveyor. You know, so it gives this starting point to let you know where your point of beginning is. And then they start all of their measurements. See, the front of the lot is a radius because there's a bend in the road. So they're talking about it curves to the left, having a radius of 325 feet with an arc of 56.72 feet, you know. And then they talk about they're measuring from that point of beginning around the property, south 55 degrees, 30 minutes and 0 seconds, west 123 feet. You know, this is the way they're doing their measurements. And then they draw us a map. That's why I said, you know, if you got this map, good luck finding the actual boundaries of your property. You need to pay them the fee to just put the damn stakes in the ground so that you could wrap a string around it and see where the property line is. All right. And then it ends up looking like this with the subdivision map. You know, so here's that property in question. It's on the curve of the road. You see how the road curves? So they were doing the measurement of that arc. All right. Now, you can't really see this because it's so tiny and I can't really zoom in here on this slide, but it shows you how wide the front of the lot is, how the length is of this line, then this line, and then this line, then here, returning to the point of beginning wherever they started their measurement from. All right, so that's meets and bounds legal description of land. Now, the rest of the country that does not use the meets and bounds, everything other than the 13 original states, uses what's known as the rectangular or government survey. Among surveyors, they call it the PLSS, the Public Land Survey System, but on exams, you're not going to see it like that. You're going to see either rectangular or government survey, it'll be referenced as. It's used in Western states, not in New Jersey or any of the 13 original states. It was established by Congress in 1785. The measurement locates land using principal meridians and baselines measured by degrees of latitude and longitude to find areas of land called townships, which are 36 square miles in size, and each square mile within that township is called a section. All right, and those sections are individually numbered. So let's do the highlight here. So there's 36 sections within a township. And section number 16 is usually reserved for schools, and section number 14 for government use. Not that you need to study that for exam or anything. So this is what a township looks like. As you can see, now each townships are numbered, and each township is located by degrees of latitude and longitude on a map. And then once you locate one of these townships, the townships are broken down into 36 squares, 36 sections, and each one of those sections is 1 mile squared. This is how it starts. It starts by being numbered from the upper right-hand corner of each township, counting to the left, then the right to the left. So it goes from right to left, then left to right, right to left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the left. Now 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to the right. And it goes back and forth like that. So each section is numbered. Okay, so in the book, let's highlight this and write units of measure next to townships and sections. Highlight the word township, contains 36 square miles, and a section is further divided into 36 numbered sections. A township is further divided into 36 numbered sections. Each section contains 1 square mile. So we drew an arrow from that to this because they put a separation with this little map in between. So this is how the government or rectangular survey works. Now, a description of land here would read like this. The SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter of section 1 would be 10 acres square. Okay, that's if you see a legal description of land that reads like that, the SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter is 10 acres in size, well, that's using the government or rectangular survey. And I'll show you how what that means in just a moment. Just get all your highlights down there first.
Got it.
Okay, Alexis, good? All right.
Got it.
So here's a township. It's got 36 squares in it. Each one of those squares is a section. How big is each one of the sections? How big is each one of the sections?
1 square mile.
1 square mile. Okay. If we were to break this down, we zoom in on a section now. So this entire box that we see here is 1 square mile. But forget about all the writing in it. If we were to break this down, here's the legal description that says the SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter is 10 acres in size. SE stands for southeast quarter. So if we were just to take this section and draw a cross through it, it's a line straight down the middle, going up and down and side to side, we got 4 quarters. We quadrant it. This would be the southeast quarter. And then we quadrant that again. And then this is the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter. And then we quadrant that again. And this is the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter. You see how they got to that measurement? Now, you don't need to know how to read these maps because, well, we don't use this here in New Jersey. So you don't need to know how to read it. You just need to know that if you see a legal description that reads this way, the SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter is 10 acres in size, well, that's a government or rectangular survey. So remember, they told you they use degrees of latitude and longitude to find areas of land called townships. So those are those invisible lines that we had on the globes in our classrooms. Remember that? That are separated by degrees of longitude and latitude. Okay. And then lastly, so I'm going to go over the last one, and then we're going to go over them all again. We'll do a recap. So, and then lastly, we have a plat map, which we learned in the last chapter, a map of a subdivision indicating the location and boundaries of an individual property is a plat. That's a map that is recorded in a county where the land is located. And there's examples of plat maps on page 343, 356, and 371. Each lot location designated by lot and block number within the map, often combined with the meets and bounds description to give you that measurement around each individual lot. So, a plat is a map of a subdivision to locate the individual properties by lot and block number, and combines the meets and bounds measurement to give you the measurement now of each individual lot. Every municipality consists of many different subdivisions that were built over the years as the municipalities are being developed. The tax maps are basically all the subdivision maps linked together. So a description of the land designated by lot and block number in order to locate on the map. Plat map of a subdivision, that's land divided into blocks and lots, indicates the streets, access roads, and public use or not. A subdivision plat for a condominium description, each unit references elevation of floors. Because if you have, depending on the type of architectural style of that condominium, you may have one unit above another. So how does that legal description have? Because if you were just to look at the map, a map is flat and it just shows you a flat area. You could have 3 properties if it's a 3-story condo with different units on each floor. It looks like 3 properties are located at the exact same location on a flat linear map. But if you turn it sideways and turn it 3D, now you can see that there are layers. There's heights where once the first story begins at a certain height elevation, and then the ceiling elevation is where that unit ends. And then there'll be another height where the one above it begins and ends. So what do we call that measurement of elevation? It's called the datum. So here's one example of a plat of a subdivision on page 356. It's a plat of a subdivision, all right? Actually, there's a couple subdivisions here. There's one here, small one. Here's a small one. Here's another small one, another small one, and another. See, these are all individual small subdivisions here. Here's another example of a plat map with that 8 properties on it, right? Where we saw earlier. All right, there it is again, where we broke it down, showing you the streets and the location. They show you easements and rights of ways, measurements, not just by lot and block number, but look, you got the measurement of the front of the lot, the side, the length. It shows you the distance. That's the meets and bounds. So this plat map is combined with meets and bounds legal descriptions of the individual properties. And here's a city tax map. Okay, here's the one for my section of town. You see there's a number here in the corner, 25. Well, there's also numbers on the sides of each one. You see here sheet 30, here's sheet 25, sheet 22. It shows you if you were to take these other maps that the city has and you could tape them together, you could create a big map of the entire city. It shows you how these maps, the different maps connect to each other to put together one large map of the entire area. But this is one small subdivision map of my section of where I am for the next couple of blocks in the area. That's what a tax map looks like. or a subdivision map. All right, so a licensed surveyor prepares a survey. They show the location and dimensions of a parcel of land. They show the location, size, shape, and the buildings that may be on it. When I showed you my survey, it showed you the where the shed was, where the buildings were, where the driveways and paved areas were, where a fence was. So when a survey is used, conveying a portion of the lot, placing a mortgage or determining legal descriptions, subdividing land, or construction, these are when surveys are used. See, in this example from my survey for my property, it shows you that the fence goes over the property line over here. Over from one corner, it's actually where it belongs on the property line, but then it starts to veer off of it and it goes over the property line. Shows you the location of the shed and different lots that adjoin that property. And here's a picture of a surveyor stake. He put a wooden stake in the ground because I got a survey because I'm tearing down my shed and I'm going to be putting up a new one. And so we could do fences and all that stuff. I got a survey done. Now, I already had a steel stake in the ground. I just couldn't locate it, and I didn't have a metal detector at the time. Now I bought one. But he just put in this stake in the ground and actually tore up the grass a little bit right over here where it pulled away, and you could see the surveyor stake there in the ground. And if you go line that one up to the one in the back, to the other corners of the property, you see this? Why is that surveyor stake not at the edge of the property? Why is it so far away from the curb? Anybody know?
It has to be, I think you said 10 feet from the
6 feet.
6
6
feet.
feet. Yeah. It looks like it's more than that here, but it's about 6 feet off the property line. Okay. So it's about 6 feet off the property line. That's where the surveyor stakes are because the municipality has a right of way if they want to put in like a telephone pole like this one at the corner of my driveway, which by the way, I'm going to be getting them to remove this and move it over here so that I don't have to try navigating cars around the around the telephone pole at the corner of my driveway. So you can see it here and then the other surveyor marker there. These are old photos, obviously in the fall when the grass has changed color. All right. And once again, we got that tax map again. A map of a subdivision with all the streets and lots and block and lot numbers. Although they're helpful, those lot and block numbers to locate an individual property, they're not considered legal descriptions of land, a lot and block number. So we measure elevation with condominiums, and to figure out if a property is in a flood zone or not, you measure its elevation. The datum, that's the measurement of elevation, and zero elevation is where the mean sea level at New York Harbor. So yes, it does not count the times when we have storms and we have abnormally high sea levels for temporary periods of time and then they go back down. It is the average sea level with high tide and low tide. Okay, that would be the datum. So benchmarks are permanent local reference points that aid surveyors in their measurements, which could be based on the actual benchmark, which is miles away. So a point, line, or surface from which elevation is measured or indicated is a datum. Defined by the United States Geological Survey as the mean sea level at New York Harbor. And a benchmark are those markers, those permanent reference points that aid surveyors in their measurements, which could, those are the benchmarks which are established throughout the United States. You can find them in the woods. They're all over the place. Those are the local markers that aid surveyors in making their measurements for your house in Piscataway instead of going all the way to New York Harbor and then working their way back to figure out what your elevation is. At one point that was done and surveyors put the local markers. So then the surveyor just has to go find where one of those local markers are, which I'm sure they have a database where they can locate them, because otherwise, have you guys ever seen one of these before? They're probably hidden around. You probably stepped on one on a sidewalk somewhere. They're around, they got a database of them somewhere that these surveyors get access to. All right, so once again, here's the slide that you should probably snap a picture of because it has all the definitions and all the explanations on one slide. Okay, all those different things that we've been highlighting. It's all on one slide here now. So a benchmark is that local permanent marker that aids surveyors in their measurements, which could be based on them, rather than the actual benchmark, which is miles away. The datum is the zero sea level or at New York Harbor. That's the mean sea level at New York Harbor, which is zero elevation. So a datum is a measurement of elevation, and zero datum is the mean sea level at New York Harbor. Monuments are those markers that the surveyors bang into the ground, which could be made of wood, iron, or a ribbon that's pinned to the tree. They're not going to bang a steel stake or a wooden stake into a tree, so they'll just pin a ribbon to it if a tree is on the corner of a property line. And then the legal descriptions, once again. How could they ask questions on exams about these things? Let's see. Which, by the way, on exams, you're going to get questions about benchmarks, datum, what is zero elevation, what a monument is. You'll need to know the 3 legal descriptions of land, which one is used in New Jersey, which one is used in Western states. You'll need to know what the size of a township and section. Now, when they say township, they're talking about a unit of measure. They're not talking about like Woodbridge Township, Edison Township. Those are municipalities. A type of municipality called a township is different than when a surveyor talks about a township, which they're referring to as a unit of measure. One thing has nothing to do with the other. The Woodbridge Township, Edison Township, that does not mean that those townships are 36 square miles, okay? Those are just the names, the type of municipality called a township. But township is also a unit of measure, which is something totally different, okay? They don't link the two together. So, how big is a township?
36 square mile.
And how big is a section?
1 square mile.
And a township could also be referred to as 6 miles squared. Okay, so a township is 36 square miles or 6 miles squared. Which legal description of land is used in a subdivision to locate the individual properties and their boundaries?
Plat maps.
A plat map. Which legal description of land is used in the 13 original colonies, the 13 original states?
Meets and bounds.
Meets and
Meets
bounds.
and bounds. Which legal description of land, its measurement begins and ends at a definite designated point?
Meets and bounds.
Meets and bounds. What do we call that point where a legal description begins and ends, or commences and ends?
Point of
Point of beginning.
beginning.
POB. Yep. Which legal description of land was created by Congress?
Rectangular.
The rectangular or government
Survey.
survey?
Or
I'm
government
not,
survey.
I'm not sure which way they're going to reference it on exam, so just try to remember both rectangular or government survey, okay? Which legal description of land has areas of land called townships and sections, which are located by degrees of latitude and longitude?
Government or rectangle.
Okay.
Survey.
You guys see, I'm just coming up with a bunch of different ways that they could ask these questions on exam. So, you know, you can see there's a lot of different ways that they could ask them. All right. So you guys got a picture snapped of this if you wanted it before I change
Got
the
it.
slide?
Got it.
Got it.
All right. So now let's talk about deeds. We're past legal descriptions. Let's talk about deeds on page 357. All right. You know what? Okay, so now the second half of chapter 19, deed. A deed is a written instrument where an owner of real estate intentionally conveys their rights, like air rights and mineral rights, their title. Title means ownership, or interest, which could be a partial ownership interest or the full ownership interest in a parcel of real estate. Now, the parties to a deed are the grantor, that's the owner who's selling or giving the land, and the grantee, that's the one who's receiving it. So the grantor has to sign the deed in order for it to be valid. The grantee does not need to sign the deed, just the grantor. The grantee only needs to sign the deed if they're going to record the deed in the public record, if and when they decide to record it. So only the seller, the grantor, needs to sign the deed in order for it to be valid. And deeds don't need to be dated because the transfer of ownership takes place upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. Deeds must be signed and dated and their signatures acknowledged before it can be added to the public records. So an acknowledgement is basically making sure the person is who they say they are. Their identities need to be confirmed to prevent forgeries, such as by a notary, a judge, attorney, or other trusted person, like an elected official. Go figure, trusted person, huh? Before it can be recorded in the public records. Now, deeds are valid even if not recorded in the public record, because the ownership happens upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. So that's when the transfer of ownership takes place. So the deed is still valid even if you don't record it. You're holding that deed in your hand. But to prevent any kinds of anybody trying to do something wrong or register that they're the owner, or to prevent issues, it's always in your best interest to record your interest in the deed. The new owner records their interest as them being the owner now, and the seller records the fact that they're no longer the owner. So if somebody trips and falls on the property, they're not going to be suing the old owner who no longer has anything to do with the property. So these are valid, though, even if they're not recorded in a public record, but it's in everybody's best interest to make sure they are. So there are 4 types of deeds: the full covenant and warranty deed, a bargain and sale deed with covenants against Grantors Act, also known as Covenants versus Grantors Act, also known as a special warranty or limited warranty deed. Then we have the bargain and sale deed with no covenants, no legal promises. And then we have a quitclaim deed. So we're going to go over these 4 types of deeds, and then we're going to go over the anatomy of a deed. So a deed is that document. It's that written instrument where an owner intentionally conveys their right, title, or interest in a parcel of real estate. Deeds do have to be in writing in accordance with the statute of frauds that requires them to be. And the owner who sells or gives the land is the grantor, and the one who acquires that property, the buyer or the receiver, is the grantee. So the deeds that offer the most protection to the buyer to the ones that offer the least are in that order that I just read. Full covenant and warranty deed, basically a full warranty deed. Then the bargain and sale deed with Covenants Against Grantors Act, also known as a CVG or CAG deed. Bargain and sale CAG, bargain and sale CVG type deed. That's just an abbreviation for Covenants Against Grantors or Covenants versus Grantors Act. Then we have the bargain and sale deed. Nothing after that. No covenants go with it. And a quitclaim deed, where the person just gives up any interest of making a claim in it on the property. Okay. So you guys got these highlights and notes down?
Yes.
Okay. So once again, here it is on this slide, just cleaned up a little bit with the alternative, what they call these deeds, like the warranty deed, also known as a general warranty deed or a full covenant and warranty deed. It's a full warranty. Then that offers the most protection of any deed. We're going to go over what those full warranties are, what those guarantees are that are made in a warranty deed in just a moment. Then we have the bargain and sale CAG, Covenants Against Grantors Act, also known as the Covenants versus Grantors Act. So it could just be abbreviated as bargain and sale CAG or bargain and sale CVG type deed. Also known as a special warranty or a limited warranty deed. With this type of deed, you're just saying, hey, as long as I've owned the property, I've done nothing to encumber it. I'm not guaranteeing anybody that owned it before me for that. Do your own due diligence, get a title search and title insurance. So this is the most common type of deed that we use here in New Jersey. And then there's the bargain and sale, straight bargain and sale deed without any covenants. This type of deed is often used at sheriff sales and auctions and whatnot. And then we have the quitclaim deed, which can just as effectively transfer ownership as a full warranty deed, but it's not making any warranties or guarantees. It's not even claiming the person that signs it has any interest in the property. Okay. Now, if they do have full ownership interest when they sign a quitclaim deed, they could just as effectively transfer that ownership as a full warranty deed can, but it's just not making any guarantees. So once again, let's look at this. This is the warranty deed. Provides the greatest protection of any deed. And so these are the covenants or guarantees that come with it. And we'll go over them on the next slide. I got them typed up on the next slide, so we'll just go over them on the next slide. Just do these highlights and we'll go over them on the next slide.
Got it.
So the warranty deed provides the greatest protection of any deed. So what are these warranties that are coming with it? Well, the covenant of season, covenants against encumbrances, covenant of quiet enjoyment, the covenant of further insurance, and the assurance and the covenant of warranty forever. So let's go over these. A covenant of season means you're seized of the land. It's in your possession, and you have the right to convey the title to it. Then we have the covenant against encumbrances. This promise states that the grantor warrants the property is free from any liens or encumbrances and will defend it. An encumbrance is a claim by another or liability against real estate, such as taxes, judgments, liens, restrictive covenants, easements, licenses, that may diminish the use or value of the property, which the grantee was not made aware of. The covenant of quiet enjoyment states that a grantee, that a title is good against third parties, against that may lay claim against it, and will defend it in the court of law if anybody claims that they're the owner. And then a covenant of further assurance means that the grantor promises to obtain any documents for evidence to fight to prove that you have good, clear title on that property in court. And then we have the covenant of warranty forever. It states that if promises in the warranty ever fail, the grantor will reimburse the grantee for any loss sustained. Okay, that sounds good on paper and all, but what if they're broke? The promise means nothing, right? If you're broke. So, I mean, this states that this deed offers the most guarantees, it offers the most protection of any deed. Yeah. If they got money. If they don't got money, what good is that offer to protect, right? Now, these covenants are not limited to matters that occurred during the time the grantor owned the property. They extend back to all previous owners throughout history as well. So since the beginning of land record keeping, you're saying if you're offering a warranty deed that since the beginning of record keeping of land ownership here in the United States, I could guarantee you that no time in the past has there ever been an improper transfer of this property where all the owners didn't sign off of it on the transfer of the ownership and such? How could you make such a warranty? How could anybody make such a warranty? That for the last couple of 100 years, we didn't, there was never a improper transfer of ownership. You know, that's a lofty promise to make, right? So we should never get our clients to sign a deed that has a sales contract that offers a full warranty or general warranty deed. Okay, then we have the bargain and sale deed with covenants against grantors act, also known as covenants versus grantors. In this type of deed, the owners who's signing it is just saying, I've done nothing to encumber this property while it was in my possession. But I'm not guaranteeing anybody who's owned it before me. For that, do your own due diligence, get a title search and a title insurance policy. Okay, so this is the most common type of deed used here in New Jersey. So it's a special or limited warranty deed because you're only guaranteeing the time that you own the property that you did nothing wrong to encumber it. You're not guaranteeing anybody that may have owned it before you. Hey, everybody get that? Let me know when you do.
Got it.
Got it.
Then we have the straight bargain and sale deed. There's nothing written after that. No covenants, no nothing. So it's a totally different deed. A bargain and sale deed is a totally different deed from a bargain and sale CAG deed. So don't get lazy when meaning to say bargain and sale CAG deed and say a bargain and sale deed. It's a totally different deed. So a bargain and sale deed, that's it, without any covenants. The seller says they have the legal right to sell the property, but they're not giving any other promises as to the quality of the title, that it's free from any liens or encumbrances or any defects or anything like that. This is why they use this at sheriff's sales. You know, the sheriff's department saying, we got the legal right to sell the property. We're not guaranteeing you the quality of the title. Do your own due diligence. So it's used in sheriff sales, foreclosures, tax sales to transfer that ownership. Okay, so the grantee, the buyer, has little recourse if defects appear later if they did not do their own due diligence. Caveat emptor. That means let the buyer beware. Do your own due diligence. So you also need to know that term. Caveat emptor. Now it's caveat emptor. It means let the buyer beware. That's how you pronounce it. It's not caveat, it's caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware. All right. Everybody got this highlighted?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the quitclaim deed. Provides the least amount of protection of any deed. It carries no covenants or warranties. It doesn't even apply that the person signing it has any ownership or rights in the or interest in the property. Only that they're going to quit or give up any claims of interest. Not saying that I have any. So it offers the least protection of any deed. With this type of deed, having somebody sign it, they're just saying, yeah, I'll give up my interest in your property, in this property. So that's like me signing the deed for your house that you own. I'll sign a quitclaim deed on your house. I'll give up my claims of interest on your house. Not that I have any to begin with, right? Are you gaining anything if I sign a quitclaim deed on your house? No, because I don't have any interest in your house anyway. So signing a quitclaim deed, if I don't have any interest in the property, then the buyer gets nothing. But if I do, if I am the full rightful owner, I could just as effectively transfer my interest in that property to you by signing a quitclaim deed. So it's often used for simple transfers within a family, transfers during divorce settlements, or to clear up clouds on the title when there's a break or gap in the chain of title. So a quitclaim deed can transfer ownership just as effectively as that full warranty deed can, if the grantor has good title and interest in that property. If they don't, well, you gain nothing by getting them to sign it. Everybody got these highlights down from 363 and 364?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go over the anatomy of the deed now. You have the grantor, which is the person, the owner. They have to have legal capacity to execute and sign that deed. Sound mind, legal age. Then you have the grantee, that's the buyer, typically. They're named with reasonable certainty so that they could be identified. So they have to be named in the deed. And then consideration needs to be expressed. What are the three legal forms of consideration? Consideration is the full purchase price. What are the three legal forms of consideration? You guys remember that from chapter 11, I think it was? Money, right? What do we call that? Legal tender? What else? What are the three legal forms of consideration? We've got money or mortgage loan. That's legal tender. What else? What are the other forms of consideration, the full purchase price? An exchange of something of value. I'll give you this or I'll do this in exchange for that, like with bartering. What else? What's the last one? No, don't have it. Love and affection. Love and affection.
I was gonna say that, but I was like, no, it's not that.
It is. You guys need to study that. You need to know the three legal forms of consideration. Okay. So the granting clause is the heart of any deed, explaining what is being sold or transferred. It is the heart of the deed. The habendum clause always follows the granting clause. When something needs to be further clarified that was mentioned in the granting clause, it needs to be expressed in the habendum clause. Okay? The habendum clause begins with the words to have and to hold, which for some reason you need to know for exams. What is the clause in the deed that begins with the words to have and to hold? The habendum clause, okay? Here, the way to remember that, I just mispronounced the word a little bit. The habendum clause is the haben to hold clause. Habendum is the haben to hold clause, right? So that's the clause that begins with the words to have and to hold, the habendum clause. So basically, if you state in the granting clause that you got two owners of the property, one of them paid 75% of the cash, the other paid 25% to buy the property. If you don't state in the deed that you're anything other than 50-50 owners, you're 50-50 owners. So the habendum clause is where you would state that. So the granting clause, you state who the owners are that are buying it and how they're buying it, etc., which we'll get into on the next slide. The habendum clause is where you would clarify that by stating, yeah, this person's 75% owner, this person's 25% owner. Because if you didn't do that, you're 50-50. And you have to have any deed has to have a legal description exactly explaining what exactly is being transferred here. What property? What are the three legal descriptions that we went over in this chapter? In the same chapter, what are the three legal descriptions of land? Meets and bounds. That's one.
Meets and bounds. Oh wait. The date.
Rectangular.
The government or rectangular
Rectangular survey.
And the last one?
Plat map.
A plat map recorded in a county where the land is located. Those are the three legal descriptions of land. Now, deeds, they do not need to be dated in order to be valid because the transfer of ownership takes place upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself, not by any date that's there. And they only need to be signed by the buyer when the buyer goes to record the deed in the public record. And their signature should be acknowledged. You need to know that term, acknowledged. What is an acknowledgement? It is when we try to make sure that the signatures are genuine to prevent forgeries, where somebody has verified the identity of the signers by checking their IDs or knowing who they are personally. They're acknowledging that fact. Okay. So deeds do not need to be dated in order to be valid or signed by the buyer unless they want to record it. So these are the requirements for a valid conveyance. And then I just had you write that at the end. Why don't deeds need to be dated again? Why do we need to date deeds for them to be valid? When does the transfer of ownership take place?
It just gotta be acknowledged, right?
Well, when does it only needs to be acknowledged if they're going to record it in a public record.
Oh yeah.
My question is, how come deeds don't have to have dates in them? When does the transfer of ownership take place?
When sellers sign the deed and give it to the buyer and buyer accepted.
Upon delivery and acceptance of the deed. Okay. So that's why. That's why it doesn't need to be dated. All right. So here is the anatomy of the deed as I broken down with a little more detail. The seller has to be 18 years of age or older to effectively convey, or the contract may be voidable. It must have legal capacity to execute and sign a deed, be sound mind and legal age. The grantee is the buyer, who must be named in the deed with reasonable certainty so that they could be readily identified. There has to be some sort of consideration, just like with contracts. In order for a deed to be valid, it must state the consideration. All right. And it has to have a clause acknowledging the receipt of that consideration, something of value that's exchanged between the parties, legal tender, that's money or a mortgage loan, and a fair exchange of goods or services or love and affection. So a consideration of $1 or love and affection must be accompanied by an affidavit, which is a sworn statement, explaining that the transaction is a gift. So there you go. We have to know the term acknowledgement. We have to know what an affidavit is as well. It's a sworn statement. Then the granting clause is the heart of any deed. It explains what type of deed it is, what is being transferred exactly. Is it someone's title, rights, or interest? How the new owner is taking ownership. Are they taking ownership as tenancy in severalty, tenancy in common, joint tenancy, or tenancy by the entirety? Which one of those is sole ownership by one person or entity?
Severalty.
Severalty. Your interests are severed. Comes from the root word sever, not several, but sever. Correct. Which one's the default form of ownership, unless otherwise stated in the deed, when there's two or more people?
Tenancy in common.
Tenancy in common. And then what would you state otherwise as an alternative to tenancy in common?
Joint.
Joint tenancy. And joint tenancy has 4 unities that have to be in common in order to have a joint tenancy. Anybody remember what those unities are? The acronym TT.
Time.
TTIP.
Title.
Uh-huh.
Interest.
TTIP. Possession.
Possession.
Time, title, interest, and possession. And what is the only benefit to having joint tenancy?
Survivorship.
The right of survivorship. Okay. And then lastly, we have tenancy by the entirety, which is ownership by married couples who also have the right of survivorship. All right. And then we have the habendum clause, which follows the granting clause anytime something needs to be further clarified or explained. The habendum clause begins with the words to have and to hold, and its provisions cannot be in contradiction with what's in the granting clause. It's supposed to be supporting of that, whatever stated in the granting clause. Anytime something requires clarification, like percentage of ownership, if there's several owners and they don't have equal ownership shares, or if you're going to be naming a remainder man, such as if it's a life estate. What do we call a life estate that's based on someone else's life, a third party's life?
Sorry, what is the question?
What do we call a life estate that's based on someone else's life, a third party's life?
Heir.
Porotravie, a life estate, porotravie. It means for the life of another. All right. And then we have to have a description of the real estate. either meets and bounds, a rectangular or government survey, and a plat map. Although lot and block numbers and the property's address may be helpful in describing the property, they're not a legal description. As a matter of fact, the post office, they could change your property's address, believe it or not. Exceptions or reservations need to be stated if there's any restrictions that are to be added into the deed. And what do we call deeds that are based on a restriction? Ownership based on a restriction? Fee determinable, defeasible, or conditional fee estate. I have it written right there. And I got a cross-reference page number from chapter 6, page 104. And then the signature of the deed on the deed by the seller. The seller needs to sign. Deed is not valid if the seller does not sign it. And the acknowledgement, an acknowledgement proves the signatures are genuine. So anybody who signs a deed, their signatures should be acknowledged to prevent forgeries. Okay, so any exceptions and reservations affecting the title, the signature of the grantor, the seller, an acknowledgement, that's a declaration made before a notary public, judge, attorney, or elected official, or other authorized public officer. It provides evidence the signature is genuine to prevent forgeries. And then we have delivery and acceptance. Implied delivery and acceptance is possible. Transfer of ownership takes place upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. That's why deeds do not need to be dated. And when delivered and accepted, the owner is said to have seized the land, and ownership transfers at that moment in time. So, consideration, what is that? Page 364. To be valid, all deeds must contain an clause acknowledging something of value given or received in the exchange. Where is this acknowledgement? 364. Oh, okay, at the top of the page, 364. It's not there. Consideration. This is on, page 364 at the bottom of the page. And affidavit sworn statement, that's at the top of 365. Okay. All right. Everybody got it? All right. So then we have the habendum clause. Let's highlight that and put that note in there. It further clarifies terms stated in the granting clause, like percentage of ownership or naming a remainder man. For deeds to be valid, they got to have legal descriptions. Exceptions and reservations, they're talking about restrictive covenants. That's from chapter 6, page 104. And deeds that are based on restrictions are fee determinable, defeasible, and conditional fee estates. I'll give you a moment to copy all these notes.
Got it.
Got it.
Okay. So signature of the grantor, the seller, must be signed by all the grantors, all the sellers. This is an interesting fact here. This is pretty interesting because what if you gave somebody a power of attorney to sign the documents on your behalf at the closing? How does that work? Well, to be valid, a deed must be signed by all the grantors named in the deed. The grantor's signature may be signed by an attorney in fact, acting under a power of attorney. But an attorney in fact is any person who's been given power of attorney to execute and sign legal instruments for the grantor. In such cases, it's usually necessary for that power of attorney to be recorded in the county where the property is located as well. That's being recorded with the deed. Because the power of attorney terminates on the death of the person who granted them that authority. Evidence must be submitted that the grantor was alive at the time the attorney in fact signed the deed. How do we prove that the person was alive at the time the attorney in fact signed the deed? Well, any date after that, all you need is the person who gave them that authority, that power of attorney. You just need that grantor to appear before a notary, and basically the notary will sign a document showing that they produced the identification and appeared before them on a date after that date that they signed that deed, those legal documents. Because if they're alive after that day, well, then that means they were alive on that day that they were signing those documents, right? See, this is how we need to record these documents in the public record. Otherwise, how do you prove years later if somebody's doing a title search? They see that somebody signed a deed, and who the hell is this person? They're not named in the deed. Oh, they had a power of attorney. Okay. Well, was it the power of attorney valid still? Well, let's see. Was there there's another document, some kind of evidence showing that the grantor gave that power of attorney the power if they were still alive after that date? That would be good enough. And then you record that document as well in the public records. All right, so we learned that an acknowledgement provides evidence that the signatures are genuine to prevent forgeries. So an acknowledgement is a declaration made by a person who signs a document before a notary public or authorized officer. Acknowledgement provides evidence the signature is genuine to prevent forgeries. And although an acknowledgement is not required to make a deed valid in New Jersey, all deeds, mortgages, and other documents have to be acknowledged before they can be recorded in the public records. If the deed's not acknowledged, it's not considered a valid document. All right. How does a transfer of ownership take place when people don't know how to read or write? During the Middle Ages, this was quite common. Only rich people had education. That's how you keep people under your control if you're a king or queen or emperor, right? You keep the population dumbed down. Kind of like we got right now. We got a bunch of politicians out there trying to keep the population stupid. How do we do that? Well, we lower our education standards. We got people graduate. I seen something the other day where there was this girl. She graduated high school with honors. and she didn't know how to read or write. How
Yeah,
the hell does that happen?
the family was suing or something, right?
Did you see that?
I
Did
seen
you-
I seen like two stories like that. They were suing because they graduated with honors and they don't know how to read and write.
How the hell? See, this is what we call the DEI. A lot of people say DEI. Diversity, equity, inclusion. It's kind of like pandering. It has to deal with race stuff. And that's stupid. There's no reason for that. Um, uh, you know, DEI. It really stands for didn't earn it. you know, uh, you're given something for nothing. For what? For your skin color, or because of your sexual orientation, or whatever it is. The reason that they're pandering to people. These are politicians that are coming up with these dopey rules. Um, it's nothing more than those laws. That were outlawed now because they were considered discriminatory. Uh, what was that they used to give uh, minorities preferences in college or extra points just simply for being a minority? So you could get higher scores and grades so that you could get in. They had it for so many years. I forget what the heck they called that, but that was outlawed. That practice was outlawed just recently. Just recently, in the last couple of years, it was outlawed. It was found to be discriminatory. There's no reason for that anymore. Um, I guess there may have been in a time when there was trying to make up for all the discrimination against minorities and people of color, right? But today we don't need that. That's discriminatory, people of color are not stupid. They could compete with everybody. They could get good test scores. They don't need extra help just because of their skin color to get extra points. So that was outlawed, that practice. Um, but that's how a population of politicians, supreme leaders, um, kings and queens or emperors, that's how they remain in control. They only keep the rich people smart and educated. It was illegal for anybody else to have an education. Um, and that's the way you keep control of a population. You keep them stupid. You dumb them down. If they can't read, then you can write anything you want on a piece of paper, and even if they see it, it's not going to matter because they don't know how to read it. It's like a secret decoder ring. You need to have that for that. And some countries they still act like that to keep people under control. Look, there's a lot of countries that keep women. Women are still they're considered practically property. You know, and the way to keep them dumbed down, you don't give them driver's licenses, you don't allow them to go to school. We see this in a lot of these other countries going on right now. So, how did this happen in the Middle Ages? How did we transfer ownership of property when people were illiterate and did not know how to read or write? So, title said to pass when a deed is delivered. So highlight delivery and acceptance, title said to pass when the deed is delivered, because that's when the transfer of ownership takes place. But what happens if they don't know how to read or write? How do we transfer that ownership? Well, you guys ever recall those commercials that used to be on TV? We used to call them PSAs or public service announcements. They were cartoons for children. Schoolhouse Rock. You guys ever hear that? Schoolhouse Rock? You know, what is a bill? It's like cartoon characters and singing and stuff. What is a bill? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? They were education for children. Okay. Well, think of those cheesy cartoon characters and those voices as I read to you this story that explains how the transfer of ownership took place in the Middle Ages when few people were literate. That means they knew how to read or write. So In England during the Middle Ages, when few people were literate, transfer of title occurred in the following manner. The seller took the buyer to the field in question and they walked the boundaries. This was known as the beating of the bounds. Then the seller reached down and they took a clod of earth that represented the whole field and they handed it to the buyer. At the moment when the buyer seized that clod, they became the owner of the land. Today, a document is used instead of a clod of earth, but title still said to transfer at the moment of delivery and acceptance, and the owner still said to be seized of the land. So the word season still denotes ownership and control. Can you practically see those little cartoon characters walking around the boundaries of the property, and then the guy picks up a piece of dirt and drops it in the other guy's hand, and he's like, yeah, now I'm the owner. You know, that's basically what happened. When people didn't know how to read or write, you just walked them around and say, here, that's the corner of the property there, that's the corner of the property there, these are the boundaries. Okay. Picked up a piece of dirt, dropped it in his hand, there you go, you're the owner. That's how we transferred ownership. Kind of hard to prove that you're the owner with a piece of dirt. All right. What are you gonna do? Show, look, I own the land, look, here's my dirt. Well, I got some dirt too. Who's the owner? Yeah. But that's the way it worked in the Middle Ages. So people could easily get screwed out of their ownership too back then, right? Okay, so execution of corporate deeds. Who has the authority to sign on behalf of the corporation when transferring ownership of property? You don't just get somebody who comes in the real estate office and says, yeah, we want to list a property for sale with you. Okay, well, the tax records show that the property is owned by a corporation. Who are you? Do you have some sort of a letter of authorization from that corporation that shows that you have the authority to sign on behalf of the corporation? If you're the owner of the corporation, you should have the creation documents or some kind of evidence. So with a corporation, corporations can convey real estate with a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. Now, this generally requires a resolution authorizing the sale be secured from the stockholders when a substantial amount of the real estate is owned by the corporation or it's being conveyed. Otherwise, all that's needed is a proper resolution passed by the board of directors authorizing one person to be the representative to sign any official documents to list or sell that or buy property on behalf of the corporation. So let's highlight a corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. And deeds to real estate can be signed only by an authorized officer. The affixing of a corporate seal is only needed if it's mentioned in that authorization letter, if they mention the need of a corporate seal. And that concludes chapter 19. Let's do the key terms to review for chapter 19. And then we move on to the last chapter, 21. So, one who receives key terms 1 on page 368. One who receives property through a deed.
Grantee.
Grantee.
The grantee, 9 is A. Deed implying the grantor owns the property, but nothing more. What kind of deed just says, hey, I have the right to sell it, and that's it?
Bargain and sell. CAG? No, bargain and sell deed.
Yeah, just a straight bargain and sale deed without anything after it. 2 is B. Actions that actually transfer title.
Delivery and acceptance.
Delivery and acceptance. 8 is C. A clause in a deed that makes the transfer.
Granting clause.
Granting clause.
The granting clause. 10 is D. A legal promise is referred to as
Covenant.
a covenant. 5 is E. A document used to transfer title to a parcel of real property.
A deed.
Deed.
7 is F. deed. The mean sea level at New York Harbor, also local zero elevation point.
A datum.
6 is G, the datum. Deed, stating the grantor has not encumbered the property.
Bargain and sell. CAG.
Correct. 3 is H. A declaration to a notary or other official to prevent forgeries.
Acknowledgement.
1 is I, an acknowledgement. And a marker placed by the U.S. Geological Survey stating elevation.
A benchmark.
4 is J. All right, and key terms 2. Spot at which the meets and bounds description begins and ends.
Point of beginning.
The POB. 6 is A. Fixed natural or man-made objects identifying boundaries in the meets and bounds description.
Monuments.
5 is B. Monuments. One who transfers title by signing a deed.
Grantor.
1 is C, the grantor. Description sufficient to identify a parcel that is acceptable by a court of law.
Legal description.
The legal description. 3 is D. To have and to hold clause that explains ownership.
And
Abandon clause.
them clause.
Habendum clause. 2 is E. Correct. They kind of cut off that explanation right there. So, a deed providing grantee with the most protections.
Warranty deed.
A warranty deed or general warranty deed or full covenant and warranty deed. 9 is F. A system for land description used in Western states.
Rectangular.
Rectangular.
Rectangular or government survey. Correct. 8 is G. A deed releasing any interest grantor may have without actually claiming season.
Quit
claim
claim.
deed.
A quick claim deed. 7 is H. And a description using boundaries and direction.
Meets.
Meets and bounds.
Meets and bounds. 4 is I. And that concludes chapter 19.